The day they sealed my cabin gate was the day they sealed their own fate. You ever wake up thinking, well, there goes the neighborhood, only to realize, no, today the neighborhood's about to get a whole lot more interesting? Let me tell you, 6 a.m. in Montana, still rubbing sleep out of my eyes, and there's Delilah Peton, queen of the HOA and world's biggest fan of other people's misery, standing outside my gate, supervising as a work crew pours concrete all around my posts. Just straight up blocking off my property like it's some high-security government facility. She had the nerve to smirk at me, too, like she'd finally won this weird little power struggle she'd invented in her head. But what Delilah didn't realize, what nobody in that whole development realized, is that while they were busy trapping me, they'd actually just trapped themselves. See, their fancy Pine View Estates only has one road in and out, and every single inch of that road runs through my private land. While they were out there sealing up my gate, thinking they'd banish the big bad hermit, they were really just locking themselves in. 47 luxury homes, one escape route, and I own every bit of it. 3 months later, Delilah would be begging me, literally on her knees in the rain, not to leave her and her little HOA kingdom stranded forever. But right then, she thought she was untouchable. You ever had someone block your driveway and dare you to do something about it? Let me tell you, this whole story only gets wilder from here. My name's Marcus Brennan, and 6 months ago, I thought losing my wife Sarah was the worst thing that could happen to me. But that was before I met my new neighbor. I inherited 40 acres of raw Montana wilderness from my grandfather, complete with a weather-beaten cabin and, most importantly, a private gravel road that wound its way right to Highway 12. The crunch of tires on that road was the soundtrack to every summer of my childhood. Nothing but sky, pine, and the slow thump of my grandfather's old pickup. Things started changing in 2019 when developers showed up, like they always do, with promises and cash and not a clue how to live off the land. They built Pine View Estates around my property. 47 McMansions sold as luxury mountain living. Their glossy brochures promised convenient highway access, but what they didn't mention was that convenience meant sneaking through my private road like it belonged to them. The original developers, I'll give them this, had a handshake deal with my grandfather. But handshakes don't hold up in court, and when the land got sold off to the HOA, everyone just started acting like they owned everything. For 4 years, nobody bothered to ask whose land they were driving on. Then Delilah Peton rolled in, bought the biggest house on the block, and crowned herself queen. And let me tell you, at 49, Delilah was the living embodiment of everything I can't stand about suburban power trips. Designer yoga pants that probably cost more than my truck, a white BMW always parked sideways across 2 spaces, and that condescending little smile she wore like war paint. Within 6 months, Delilah was the HOA president, promising to protect property values and keep out declining influences. The cabin workshop, my sanctuary, still smelled like cedar shavings and motor oil, reminders of my grandfather's hands, and weekends where I could forget about everything except the sound of wind through the pines. But peace is a fragile thing, especially when someone like Delilah decides your gate doesn't fit her vision. She showed up one afternoon with a clipboard and a smile sharp enough to cut wire. "We need cohesive design elements," she said, tapping her manicure against her notes. "Something more upscale." She even brought a list of pre-approved contractors just to help me out. I told her as politely as I could that my gate sat on private property, not under HOA control. That didn't wipe the smile off her face, just made her eyes go cold. "Oh, sweetie, geography creates mutual responsibilities. We'll work this out. When a suburban tyrant calls you sweetie, run the other way." 2 weeks later, a county inspector showed up, hunting for illegal structures and environmental violations. Someone had filed a complaint. The inspector found nothing, of course. My grandfather built everything to code, but the message was clear. Delilah wasn't going to stop. Next HOA meeting, I could feel the stink of cheap coffee and nervous sweat as neighbors avoided my eyes. Delilah had been whispering I was unstable, maybe dangerous, a veteran with authority issues. Suddenly, my gate was being blamed for security vulnerabilities in the community. 20 years as an Army Corps engineer, taught me how these petty tyrants work. They're all volume, no backbone, just hoping nobody stands up to them. The escalation really began on a sticky September evening. Delilah knocked on my door, clipboard in hand, demanding I attend mandatory meetings to discuss my compliance obligations. I explained slowly, like you would to a kid, that I wasn't in the HOA and never would be. She actually laughed. Geographic proximity creates legal obligations. Your little hermit act ends now, Marcus. Next thing I knew, there were more county complaints, pure fiction, but wrapped in bureaucracy. That night, with the scent of pine needles and my late wife's lavender candles hanging in the air, I opened up my grandfather's old surveyor case, brass tools gleaming under the lamp, and started digging through yellowed property deeds. If Delilah wanted a fight, she'd picked the wrong veteran. And she wasn't working alone. She'd rallied the Community Beautification Committee, her personal army of yoga pants enforcers, armed with Pinterest boards and a serious lack of boundaries. They started conducting voluntary property assessments, knocking on doors and measuring every fence and mailbox. My gate was their number one target. When the formal letter arrived, I actually laughed. Accused of unauthorized rustic styling, failure to maintain aesthetic harmony, and, my personal favorite, geographic noncompliance with community vision. That's a real thing, apparently. I ignored it. Delilah responded by declaring my gate a public nuisance and filing another county complaint, this time about mysterious easement agreements that only existed in her imagination. That's when I switched from defense to offense. 3 nights later, in my grandfather's workshop, I struck gold. The original 1987 land deeds, clear as day, showed my family never granted any easement. That gravel road? Entirely private. Built, owned, and maintained by 3 generations of Brennans. Every car that had driven through in the last 4 years was trespassing. I sent copies to my old Army buddy Jake Morrison, now a property rights lawyer in Helena. His call came back fast. Marcus, this is bulletproof. They've got zero legal right to your road. You could block access tomorrow, and they'd be powerless. But after 20 years in the military, I knew better than to go nuclear right away. Sometimes, you let your enemy think they're winning, just long enough to set the perfect trap. I offered Delilah a generous deal, an easement for $1 a year and a mutual respect clause requiring the HOA to talk to me before making any changes affecting my property. She laughed in my face, called it extortion, and accused me of inventing a crisis. In her mind, using my road for 4 years somehow gave them the right to own it. You can't hold an entire neighborhood hostage over technicalities, she declared. She really believed that. Next came the lawyers. Certified letters, thick enough to double as doorstops, from the fanciest firm in town. All of it legal theater, 40 pages boiling down to surrender your rights, or we'll sue you into the ground. They demanded permanent public access, or they'd pursue eminent domain. Pure bluff, but it told me everything about how far Delilah was willing to go. While she burned through the HOA's money on lawyers, I spent evenings hunting through public records. Turns out, Delilah had been selling houses with promises of guaranteed highway access, listing my private road as a community amenity. She'd sold 3 homes in the last year with that pitch. That's called fraud, by the way. One buyer had even filed a formal complaint when their moving truck got stuck and they started asking questions about road maintenance. Delilah couldn't answer because there was no easement. So I started documenting everything, trail cameras catching every vehicle, every delivery, every school bus rolling over my land. My row, my rules. The crunch of gravel had never sounded so sweet. Meanwhile, Delilah, in a panic, installed surveillance cameras pointed at my house and started photographing my truck, my gate, even my trash cans. She was building a case against me, while I was building the case that would end her. Delilah's next move was to launch a community petition for public road access, turning neighbors against me with scare tactics about threatened emergency services and declining property values. She went door to door, playing the hero against the evil hermit. Some neighbors signed without reading, but a few started asking, wait, why do we need this if we already have access? That's when I started installing obvious professional trail cameras and big warning signs. The psychological impact was instant. Every morning commute became a reminder they were trespassing. A few days later, 3 families showed up at my door, quietly, nervously, asking about property boundaries. Word was spreading. Maybe Delilah wasn't the legal genius she thought she was. Instead of backing off, she went nuclear. Hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on my military service, my finances, my family. The PI quit after 4 days, reporting back that I was the world's most boring neighbor. Her next trick? Trying to bribe a county inspector to find violations on my property. That was a mistake. The inspector reported her to the county attorney, launching an ethics investigation that would turn her whole world upside down. And then, it happened, the day they poured concrete around my gate. 3 cement trucks rumbling down my private road. Workers moving fast while Delilah supervised, her perfume mixing with diesel exhaust. She called out to me, "Just a little construction, Marcus, while we sort out your attitude problem." I didn't argue. Instead, I thanked each worker, slipped them a $20 for coffee, and made 3 phone calls. County building inspector reporting unpermitted barriers blocking emergency access. Jake to prepare legal action, and my insurance adjuster for property damage claims. But here's the twist. By blocking my gate, they'd blocked their own only escape. Mrs. Patterson from Unit 23 was the first to realize it, standing by her Honda, staring at a wall of concrete. The school bus driver was next, calling dispatch in confusion. Before noon, the HOA parking lot looked like a scene from a disaster movie. Families stuck, delivery trucks reversing, everyone demanding answers. And there I was, sitting on my porch with a cold beer, watching as 47 families discovered they were now prisoners in their own luxury development. Emergency vehicles started rolling up. Fire marshal, county inspector, sheriff's deputy, all documenting the illegal mess. Delilah tried to explain it was for safety, but the walls were closing in. And then, in my grandfather's paperwork, I found the real treasure, a 1987 developer agreement, signed and notarized, stating that if emergency access was blocked for more than 72 hours, the developer, now the HOA, owed the landowner, me, $10 per day until access was restored. They'd been in breach for days, penalties climbing by the hour. When I broke the news to Delilah and the board, her face drained of color. Their assets? 40 grand. Penalties owed? Already past that and climbing. Worse, their own bylaws made the board members personally liable. For the first time, Delilah had nothing to say. The next week, I filed formal demand for payment. Jake explained that I could file liens against their homes, basically a mortgage on their stupidity. I set up a countdown sign at the entrance. Days HOA has blocked access. 7. Penalties owed, $70,000. Every car that passed got the message. Then came the psychological warfare. Security upgrades, more cameras, a digital countdown sign, and, most importantly, Eleanor Martinez. Eleanor was a retired paralegal, sharp as a tack, and tired of Delilah's nonsense. She showed up with a coalition of neighbors who'd had enough, and together, we built a case that turned the tide, documenting every violation, every penny owed, every incident of delayed emergency response. Channel 8 News picked up the story. Suddenly, Delilah was facing not just financial ruin, but federal criminal charges for obstructing emergency services and trying to bribe an official. She tried to rally support with fake social media accounts and sob stories, but the community was done. Parents realized their kids' safety had been compromised by Delilah's ego. The board resigned, one by one, and Delilah's own allies turned on her. The day of reckoning came in the elementary school gym. The fire marshal read out the violations, the penalties, the risks. Delilah tried to rally the crowd, claimed she was the victim of government overreach. But the numbers didn't lie. When I stood up and offered the original $1 easement again, plus a mutual respect clause, you could hear a pin drop. Her answer didn't matter. The sheriff was already standing, handcuffs ready. Delilah was arrested for bribery and conspiracy. Justice, finally, served with compound interest. 3 months later, the barriers were gone. The HOA had paid me $137,000 in penalties plus $23,000 in legal costs, and Delilah was awaiting trial with her house in foreclosure. Eleanor Martinez was elected HOA president. She brought transparency, respect, and sanity back to the neighborhood. My weekends returned to woodworking, the smell of cedar replacing the stench of concrete dust. And you know what? I learned something along the way, a truth I'd known but maybe never fully understood until I saw Delilah's pride shatter in that gym. Bullies only win when good people don't know their rights. You don't need to shout, you don't need to threaten, just know your facts, document everything, and let the math do the heavy lifting. Sometimes, karma doesn't need help. Sometimes, it just needs a little nudge and a really solid contract. These days, my gate stands open most weekends. Neighbors drop by for coffee, share stories, swap tools. The road that caused so much grief is now a symbol of cooperation. We even wrote in a community barbecue clause to the new easement. Last summer's gathering ran until midnight, laughter echoing through the pines, kids playing where grown-ups once bickered over property lines. But let me ask you, where do you draw the line? At what point does community protection become abuse of power? When does defending your home cross over into tyranny? I'd love to hear your stories. Drop a comment below if you've ever tangled with an HOA or stood up to a neighborhood bully. What did you learn? Did justice win? Or did you have to create it yourself? And hey, if you like stories where regular folks outsmart the system, hit that subscribe button and share your own tales. Next week, I'll tell you about a landlord who thought he could steal a veteran's security deposit. Spoiler alert, you picked the wrong guy. See you then, and remember, around here, even the math has a sense of justice.